Just one.
Oh, I'm ready.
Everyone good? Cool. Plan the Republic, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan not to eliminate their nuclear arsenals. Carroll 18 is security confidence in South Asia. Only solution will be completely abolishing nuclear weapons. Arms only effective way to ensure the non-use of nuclear weapons. Control both modalities. All those under the nuclear chain machine essential to establish nuclear responsibility measure on control. Given should be encouraged. Indo-Pak war escalates and gives nuclear only elimination of arsenals. Checks first preemptive counter strike. India would do despite an FU. Pakistan considers it to creating use or lose pressure. That's Christian Act 19. Indian defense minister India is here to identify the future depends upon circumstances. India's counter force capability the option to target Pakistan nuclear force. India's ability to counter accurate missiles in larger numbers. Ability to monitor Pakistan's nuclear forces. New capabilities giving way to temptation to destroy Pakistan's entire arsenal once you wide relied preemptive striking officials be NRE for greater flight nuclear weapon. Both India and Pakistan forward set to go for to go back. Second is Kashmir, long-running tensions, skirmishes, and rapid escalation of conventional conflict. Bukhar 19. India and Pakistan are long-running intended to cross and confrontational threatening the nuclear border escalator to identify the southern coast wars like the when the two countries came to Lisbon towards every nuclear war military skirmishes or conflict nuclear weapons to discourage conventional military power. This eventual conflict quickly escalated the possibility of nuclear change means remote war crushing response continuing further escalating beyond the leaders' control. New government should political will assault Kashmir. It seems like the Holland artillery turned de-escalate the conflict. Third is terrorism. Major retaliatory strikes hardline nationalism and Pakistan's inability to counter the Indian army making nuclear escalation. Enable IU-18 attacks by justification for India's nationalism put pressure on Indian military response. Indian retaliatory attacks target not only terrorist-based also Pakistani military facilities. Escalation to terror attacks made the situation perilous. Not only was ready to launch major retaliatory attacks against targets in Pakistan. To terrorists attack the Indian military can the Indian army destroy Pakistani army has different types reaching dangerous portion. Pakistani military not continue to operate. Indian attacks in the Indian tribal push Pakistani military retaliating force attacks and the counter superior Indian conventional force control to battlefield to nuclear weapons and will massively retaliate. Fourth is aggression, new imbalance and uncertainty arms races that international actors can check. That's McDonald 19 suicide covering Indian retaliated this week with airstrikes within Pakistan's first air power by when nuclear power against another uncharted waters. Western countries are patriarchy. This crisis fights new and political outlets willing to raise the stakes and inability of Western countries to intervene and capable of disappear movies that against the treaty retain or other with tolerating attack Pakistan no longer assume weapons strike any retaliation. The U.S. lacked credibility allowed it to end previous crises. China relations are far more free British by directly seeking Pakistan support peace to with the Taliban liberties willingness but pressure on solve by Pakistan developing battlefield nuclear missile development stressful use of nuclear weapons. Pakistan government strongly stabilize the economy. Fifth, Pakistani officials Article 370 controversy and deestablishment shifts prove nuclear escalations like that candidate. 19 Pakistani ambassadors to Pakistan retaliates with things having to the international court of Pakistan's establishment is there a nuclear people are throwing genocides or Pakistan must cover them nuclear weapons like widely held in the country's establishment that causes someone to advocate good ties with India over the years of being favored nuclear is worrisome causing represent the moderate version of Pakistani nationalism. Pakistani establishment refuses itself to law. Sixth, perception. Pakistani believe that India will first strike and Indian overconfidence triggers escalation. That's clearing during 19. Modi declared India was preparing to launch conventional missile strikes out. India set up the nuclear alert out. India alleged attacks to support terrorist groups. They killed tens of thousands of Indians. Both Pakistan's sensibility and willingness to use nuclear weapons of battlefield restricting India's superior force. India's active radar imagery and can target much of Pakistan plans to use cruise missiles. Unlike these, have the capability to disarm Pakistan nuclear medium terrorist mirrors is in such a capability likely to accelerate arms race. The possibility to disarm and managed to Pakistan early terrorist for striking India over confidence to execute counter force striking India cannot. Seventh, nuclear submarine strategic ambiguity, weak communication, devolution of command exponentially increase the risk of miscalc and accidents. Suddenly, 18 Pakistan's decision to add nuclear weapons to its navy's direction against Indian nuclear shot down nuclear submarines increase or controlled by catering paranoid officers. Pakistan test our nuke submarine launch nuclear war putting nukes in the chain again retreats the risk of accidental nuclear war increases exponentially. See wars missile power even to some communication on one way if the submarines not so almost block the tech nuclear submarines have advantage to be able to start nuclear trade and launch it out saying section with the first nukes launching new pulse fighters to de-escalate each other with the launches and hierarchical in the population centers. Nuclear war between India and Pakistan destroys the world. Johnson 19 nuclear explosion for South Korea 36 million tons of food to block 30% to 75 degrees cooling to creation by 30% globally and India tried precipitation for Dr. United States to decline 50% India Pakistan suffer 125 million fatalities temperature decline to last ice age and mass starvation. Extinction, nuke war follow creates ice age and mass starvation. That star 15 war with nuclear weapons to do mass extinction, but extinction isn't a matter of utter finality from years. It would be too cold, dark roof, and radioactive flow would poison biosphere millions of smoke to destroy ozone blocks on the creating ice age for decades, virtually any nuclear world that are essentially uninhabitable. Even limited nuclear war immediately kills hundreds of millions in 1v2 neural 19. Even one nuclear weapon explosion can do a great deal of damage. 15 kilos in airburst killed 700,000, 100 kilos in airburst, 2 million fatalities of 10 population. Nuclear war with 15 kilowatt weapons, leading fatality. World War II war with 100 kilowatt weapons directly killed 2.5 times as many fatalities occur in a single week. 8. Nuclear terror, high probability of nuclear terror in Pakistan, past attacks and insider hope proof to 17 catastrophic acquisition of nuclear by terrorist organization with active help of Oregon Section attacks led by Pakistani Navy officers report person killed with ships with Al Qaeda from Pakistan Navy Lieutenant Johani been dismissed from Navy for harboring extremely student groups by senior officer to become appreciated for all procedures and offshore development case released to Scientific PNS favor for serving commanders were arrested trying to flee the result and a module operating within the Pakistan Navy as commanders they could be operating with Pakistan's Army Air Force and credits with any fuel incentive attacks to transport attackable weapons of the front line. The insider terrorism was dangerous credible to Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. Any nuclear terrorism is possible to previous theft and low security allowing even an attempt to escalate Hague 116. India's susceptible to terrorist attack on the nuclear facility or the theft of nuclear missions created while ISIS corrects injured large-scale active terror using weapons massacring the house of Asia successfully vulnerable to terror attack on the nuclear facility VRC and Mumbai House and India's weapon terror attack on VRC constituted arsenal in 2002 and 2008 crisis escalated rapidly terrorist acts connected with military and best route from ISIS together across VRC. India's former military active facility VRC 2001 by terror attack nuclear reconnaissance into VRC. India reports of government stolen uranium 1994, 98, 2001. Oh wait, NFU fails. First, India considers preemptive strikes as defense. That's Fisher 17. India's considering preemptive strikes as defensive would make a nuclear chain more winnable with equal sign of strategic adjustment or mounting. Two, officials would go back on it, and India implied it's only for signaling. That's clearly 19 signaling India's NFUs now they're absolutely no permanent and conflict. Nothing we can control India to abide them as efficient signaling take away something ambiguous. India might use first. Three, NFUs meaningless to Pakistan. They never believed it. 2019 Pakistan trust they never believed India anyway. Nor any capabilities had an interest in making more use of weapons for India. The nuclear option beyond the table for identified access to start changes in arms races. Our study is best Reisner at all is garbage. That's tuned at all. 19 firestorms occur when criteria met. Criteria not met fuel loads too small. January firestorms are not for a target location or fuel urban golf force. Depending like India Pakistan fuel values under 10 times lower than the top 50 targets in India Pakistan. The simulation clearly not a worst case neither compared with previous studies nor listed basic comparisons. The results could not be duplicated. Reisner shows several comparisons that suppress vertical development, including a stable bachelor's or atmosphere short simulation. There's no evidence for that assumption. Plain volcanic eruptions support the results of the erroneous simulated model at sulfate aerosols and plastic represents completely different physics and like carbon. They do not simulate firestorms in densely populated urban areas and high altitudes, so they do not reproduce historic firestorms.
You can progress. Why would eliminating nukes stop like conventional conflicts in the region?
The F doesn't make them clear.
So conventional conflicts would still continue?
The F in the affirmative does not take a stance on whether or not conventional conflicts would continue or not.
So you just prevent a nuclear exchange between the region?
As for the affirmative, yes.
How would terrorists steal like nuclear materials?
So our evidence gives multiple examples of commanders within the Pakistani Navy who had access to the materials and attempted to transport them and take them. It also gives the example of insiders when battlefield tactical nuclear weapons are being transported to the front lines. The people doing the transferring are a few insiders, and if one of them was radicalized, they would have the possibility.
Okay, what incentive do terrorists have to destroy the world, like through nuclear experience?
Our argument is not about destroying the world. The argument is that they would launch a nuke on India or Pakistan when it wasn't.
Well, you say nuclear war causes extinction, so what incentive do they have to destroy the world?
Well, obviously they don't think they're destroying the world.
Why wouldn't they think they're destroying the world?
I don't know what like terrorists think is going to happen, but their intention is to launch a nuke on either India or Pakistan, depending on where the weapons get stolen from. Our argument is that even one launch is sufficient to cause massive retaliation by the other side, which causes extinction.
So they're like so oblivious they don't know what a nuke does?
I mean, I think they think that a nuke causes massive destruction. I don't think they know exactly what would happen. I don't think they've done the climatology studies. I don't think they know that India would massively retaliate or Pakistan would massively retaliate.
Okay, what are the reasons nuclear war causes extinction?
Or ice age and fallout. Or it creates mass starvation.
So ice age, fallout, and famine?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain the fallout scenario?
That's just ice age and starvation.
Oh, so no fallout? So wait,
Or the argument radioactive fallout poisons the biosphere, which blocks sunlight.
okay, how would like low food supplies cause extinction?
If there's no food for people to eat, they die.
Like how would nuclear war stop all food from being able to grow?
The point is that, well, it would completely block out the sun, so no food could grow. And even if
sure.
it did, it would block out the sun for decades, which means that even if there was like a few crops left over and a very few amount of crops would be able to grow, obviously that's not
Alright,
sustainable.
volcanic
for decades.
eruptions have produced 10 times the black soup than all the nuclear weapons
Our
produced.
Tune et al. Indicted of the Reisner study directly answers volcanic eruptions. That's a completely different physics because it's about sulfate aerosols, which are just like completely different than black carbon.
Can you explain what's the difference? Wait, why wouldn't volcanoes produce black carbon aerosols also?
You haven't read evidence for that. Our evidence indicates that the studies that take into account volcanic eruptions are about the sulfate aerosols, which are completely different physics.
Okay. I'll send the doc.
Almost done.
Yeah.
It'll be 2 off focus. Anyone not ready? First off is topicality, interpretation that must depend on all states to eliminate the nuclear arsenals, violation they spec India and Pakistan, very close prevent specification, evil 14. Very close lack determinants in the article in front telling you how much future governments are being discussed. Consider debaters as smart. Debaters refers to debaters in general. The use of very close generic. Generics refer to typical cases. If just governments is a generic very close, then the debate is about just governments in general. The generic reading is correct. The resolution is not some specific. Debate specific dialectic. The existential interpretation not eligible, so pragmatic benefits are relevant. Semantics is independent voter since the ballot says who's the independent debater in the context of the resolution. You don't have the jurisdiction to vote for them if they don't depend on the topic. Limits specifying a type of debate creates infinite F's on any type of state, allows them to inspect any state, especially with permutation that justifies 500 full F's, and they get ground out that explodes on reciprocal lines of debate with F is always ahead. They also kills neck ground since they give no link from core dissent just under sheer smallness of values. Things like the essay on nuclear power in Japan dissent outweighs we need equal access to arguments, but equal access to the ballot. Back to the debate on TV the the same thing. It was an entire advocacy text. Voters fairness of the voters since the round ensued. It's impossible to determine who the better debater was. Competing interests and ability causes race to the bottom. Reading increasingly unfair practices that believe at the front end. We should set the best norms in the war RBIs that just causes a chilling effect. If these debaters get good or RBI debate and they meaning good never check by duty. The second off is the shift dissent. Empirics and economic theory prove eliminate nuke causes by weapon acquisition. 16. Empirical and inductive historical patterns in WMD's cross-elasticity of demand using control variables to confirm robustness of results found that demand for NBC weapons to be correlated. WMD's function as substitutes. Once they acquire nuclear weapons, they're less likely to pursue chemical and biological weapons appear to satisfy demand reduction of global supply cause states pursue CDW and substitute for deterrence and components in both India and Pakistan have latent bioweapon capability. Nukes prevent the development. Yemen 13. CBWs in South Asia and both India and Pakistan are the requisite human capital well-developed farmer industry. Both chose to become part of the treaties prescribing these weapons. The motivation could have been India made a long-term investment in nuclear program biotech. In the future cannot be ruled out and that causes extinction will and send 17. Advanced bioweapons threaten human existence, historically responsible for the greatest death toll. Skeptic think it's unlikely to spread the remote populations, overcome genetic resistance as evade detecting countermeasures. Virulence and transmission is a trade-off. These arguments do not rule out species going extinct due to disease. There are historical examples of human populations right that many diseases are proved, but each worst case attribute can be realized. Biotech might combine such traits, experience resulting in enhanced transmissibility, lethality, and overcome therapeutics. The case. Extinction is inevitable from future technology. Nanotech or simulations could shut down AI, biotech particles, cell features, and black swans. Sterling 18. Misuse of nanotech enabled the construction of self-replicating robots heat up the biosphere. Beyond the extinction, tech produces destructive nanobots used in defense. There will be a period of vulnerability, hard to vulnerate. Nanotech leader arms race instability, incentives escalates armaments, causing global terminal destruction. We're living in a simulation and it gets shut down. Hypothesis: we are living in a simulation should be given significant, probably almost all amounts of simulated decision determined or simulation. Prompted by actions, badly corrupted, super intelligent, mistakenly elevate a subgoal or supergoal to solve a problem, turning all the bad into a giant calculating device. Offense, physics disasters, particle accelerator. Experiments cause a breakdown of metastable vacuum state, converting into a true vacuum with low energy density, expanding a bubble of total destruction that sweeps to the galaxy. Experiments produce brainless or mini black hole that would sink shred the rest of the planet. Even if all physics disasters are impossible, could be one other waiting to be undiscovered. An inflation of beta universes challenge fans of energy, which destroys our universe. Reality. Bubbles of space-time could inflate in pocket universes without having to be kicked out by anything as dramatic as a Big Bang. It will create runaway expansion that will rip our universe apart. We probably won't see one before it's destroyed us. And ELI experiments will rip apart the fabric of space-time, destroying all left. Earth 11. As team is planning to build an enormously powerful laser that could rip apart the fabric of space, the ELI will be 200 times more powerful than lasers that currently exist. The fabric of the vacuum can be pulled apart. The laser will be made of 10 beams, each providing 200 petawatts of power for less than a trillionth of a second, more than 100,000 times the amount of power produced by the world. And multiple countries are investing billions. The rest of that, Annual 17. US, Russia, and China are believed to be investing billions in nanoweapons research. Seriously, get their hands on nanoweapons as early as the late 2020s. Through black market sources and rigorous climate simulations prove that hydrophilic black carbon would cause atmospheric precipitation, resulting in a Raynaud effect that quickly reverses nuclear cooling. Their author and is about Reisner's volcano study, not this one. Reisner 18. The worst case scenario, only a relatively small amount of carbon makes its way to the stratosphere. These estimates are at the high end, considering the inherent simplification of the overestimating BC production. Climate change depends on the height, mixing and sedimentation, reduces process in low altitude emissions, are significantly impacted by precipitation. With the initial BC 70% rains out within the first month, the inclusion of organic aerosols should not dramatically alter the climate effect. Aerosol could shorten the resistance time of the BC, and deployment of every nuke in existence would destroy at most 1/38 of global landmass. Hull 19. If you take every weapon in existence today, total landmass to receive destructive force from all the nuke worlds, equal bonds is an area of 1.5 million square miles, not quite half half the United States and 1/30th of the world's total land mass. In truth, there would be far less higher concentration takes place over military targets. 1/182nd of the world's total land mass. And Newport doesn't cause extinction or ozone damage. We've nuked ourselves 2,000 times. Nothing happened. Econ 17. We're still here despite having nuked our own planet 2,000 times. At least in the Earth's atmosphere, more powerful than the bomb dropped in Hiroshima. And 15 islands are capable of facilitating post-apocalyptic human repopulation. I've inserted the chart in civil defense investments prevent nuclear war from causing extinction under reasonable estimates. Standard 17. Shelter providing protection would suffice. Building a sample. A shelter providing protection would suffice. Building a simple 6-foot-10 shelter covered with a few feet of dirt would provide protection from thermal blast effects. Proficient shelters such as submarines and utility tunnels would save nearly 70% of the American urban population. The civil defense system to provide stockpiles of supplies. Defense shelters a rating system that provides sufficient time to go to shelter. The most important elements of civil defense. European countries have extensive civil defense programs, and Newport doesn't cause extinction, but it'll spur political will for meaningful disarmament. Duty 18. Sooner or later, nuclear weapons will again be used in the war. Like a general nuclear war, nuclear event would not mark the end of humanity due to reduction of nuclear forces achieved in the end of the Cold War. Such an event would unambiguously put the nuclear political motion back on the top of world political agenda. Would not mistakenly remind leading states of the vulnerability, trigger more robust efforts to achieve global regulation of nuclear capability, hold the possibility of non-converting investment toward a fully bound away future, and industrial civilization would not recover Dartmouth theme. Is there any chance that post-apocalyptic society could reboot a technological civilization? We already consume most of the easily tradable crude oil fossil fuels essential to the organization of modern society. You can't spell metal, make glass, first ingredients of concrete, synthesize artificial fertilizer without fossil fuels that provide thermal energy in the world without fossil fuels. Visit the electrified civilization that largely bypasses consumption. The options presuppose that a survivor is able to conduct efficient steam turbines, CHP stations, internal combustion. In the event of civilization collapse, who is to say that knowledge won't be lost? What are the chances our descendants could be constructed? Fossil fuels out. This is true in our post-apocalyptic scenario. The 1AC cards first. Their author indites are written by Tarun and Robach and inserted the highlighting of where their authors are referenced. And Robach and Tarun just assume smoke ends up in the atmosphere. It doesn't. Rain out. Their studies are flawed. Seed 6. Dark smoke clouds in the lower atmosphere don't last enough to spread all across the globe. Droplets and rainfall remove them, washing way down into the sky in a matter of days. Real world weather brings out particles such as screwed is scrubbed out of the planet's smoke. Robach acknowledges this. Not a single degree of cooling results when suit is released at lower elevations. In his models, the workaround is to inject imaginary aerosol at truly Himalayan elevation. The new studies like the old suffer the disconnect between desires and to paint the sky black and the vicissitudes of natural history. Every month sees forest fires burning every cities. Stratospheric smoke injections arise in the blue moon. The models are intervene. Skip the next card. The Reisner card is about the volcano study, and either way, it does not make sense. Volcanoes did produce black carbon, and it would disprove this. There's no famine impact. Eckenberger 17. Recommends unblocking industrial failure scenarios, UV and cold covering crops in the tropic, upwelling of nutrient-rich deep ocean water can enable significant fishing. Solutions could enable feeding of everyone, giving minimal preparations. Skip the no firestorms card, no radiation, Libra and Press 17. Tech chipped away at inaccuracy, navigation and guidance precisely guide themselves in delivery. Spreading radiation can be minimized, weapons at high altitude greatly reducing fallout. Low yield weapons could do the job. Fallout corresponds to radiation levels escapable by OSHA. Regardless of where wind blows, tech trends together create transparency and existential threats outweigh GPP 17. Compare 3 outcomes, 1 P2 and nuclear war that kills 20%, and 3 and nuclear war that kills 100%. Most people believe the greater difference is between 1 and 2. The difference between 2 and 3 is much greater. The Earth will remain inhabitable for billions of years. These 3,000 years may be only a tiny fraction of the whole civilized human history. Existential catastrophes destroy the future. We fail to live up to principles of intergenerational authority. Cognitive bias leads people to underestimate existential risks, and they have not been catastrophes of this magnitude. These risks are not salient. Another cognitive bias affecting perceptions of existential risks is scope neglect. Decision makers are prone to treat existential risks in a similar rate of problems, which are less severe by many orders of magnitude.
Okay, good. Why would India and Pakistan develop bioweapons that kill everyone if that would include killing their own populations?
Well, as per the 1AC evidence, your evidence is talking about how they're escalating, their military is overconfident, they're willing to do anything. Like, they wouldn't realize the lethality of these bioweapons.
What evidence says that?
Like, all of the 1AC inherency.
Wait, where does the 1AC say anything about their interest in bioweapons?
No, it says that they're so arrogant, like they have military arrogance. They're so.
So why does military arrogance mean they develop lethal bioweapons that kill literally everyone on the planet?
That would also disprove the AF. Why would they use nuclear weapons that would kill everyone on the planet?
Well, because they don't think.
So they don't think bioweapons cause extinction.
That doesn't seem warranted.
Neither is your
What's a baby universe? Or actually, if we're all living in a simulation, why does extinction matter?
It would still prevent any people from experiencing pleasure.
Okay. What's a baby universe?
It's basically where scientists create a new universe within our space-time continuum, which would inflate this one and destroy it.
What is the warrant for scientists doing that?
When they're doing research, for example, they're trying to create pocket universes to recreate new civilizations.
What evidence says scientists are doing that in the status quo?
The Morale 8 talks about how scientists are doing it now.
It says bubbles of space-time could inflate pocket universes. It will create runaway expansion. We wouldn't see it. Where does that say scientists are doing the research that causes that?
Well, the argument is about physics disasters. Scientists will eventually invest or look into this stuff, which would cause this extinction level event.
Eventually?
Yeah, and
when?
it talks about specific scientists. For example, Sakai and
You didn't-
Grindelman are trying to create baby universes right now in the unhighlighted part. It says like
Um,
he and Sakai wanted to see if this would happen, so they're trying to do it.
What is the fabric of space-time?
Like, what is it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, the space-time continuum.
I have
that
no
chart
idea what
with
that
the
is.
squares on it, you know?
No.
And then the like high densities
I
go down.
I don't know what that is. I actually have no idea what that is.
I can pull up like a Google image.
But like, what does it mean to rip that apart?
It would rip apart the fabric of the universe, causing it to like. So here's the flat plane, right? The high powerful lasers would rip apart that plane, causing it to implode on itself.
Oh, where does your evidence say they have the capacity to build that laser?
They're trying to build it right now.
Yeah,
It
what
talks
says
about-
they can?
It talks about how the teams. I mean, it's talking about how they're trying to build it right now. They'll eventually develop the technology to build this.
Transition, your industrial civilization would have recovered about fossil fuels running out. How would nuke work on fossil fuels to run out?
No, there's too little fossil fuels right now that if a nuke war happened, we wouldn't be able to reboot civilization. There wouldn't be enough fossil fuels.
Sorry, bro. Did you read Kuwaiti oil fires?
No.
Okay, 208 left. T, case, case 7. Everyone ready?
I haven't got it yet. Okay.
Everyone good? Swall?
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool.
Counter Bastion specifies state stasis existential pragmatic how we co-PG all two spaces and temporal meaning state shopping such not have to be sensitive and use the existential must property to be temporary. Air app, they most likely be a fair plus right afraid. 10 generosities highly complex dependent will be appreciated by fair pull and average reporter percent of 20%. No violation. Their equal evidence isn't about this resolution. Semantics are floor on a ceiling for sufficiently predictable interpretation. The topic division ground is more important. Standards first class lots to go nothing on particular parts of literature realize for more nuanced base. These different states are different. They overload by making horror the only topic left in TOC topic which is devastating for type specific negative. Second after no advantage applies to all country picks. Each arsenal is different. Geopolitical implication change. Picks are worse than abstracts and exceptions like deterrence and FU, but absent don't have any verse picks. There are no loans explosion. There are 8 states with nuclear weapons. Due crowd. There are no salt and TFs. There are random combinations of case. Framing issue, nuclear good is repugnant, doesn't account for the unimaginable amounts of suffering and any risk of extinction. Logic justifies atrocities. Extinction does not wait. First, no impact to future generations. If they never come into existence, then they never had the capacity to experience pain and pleasure, so they don't have value. 2, their evidence assumes future people will live like great lives with tons of value. We don't know what the future will look like. It's more than possible that lives in the future will have negative value. Turning off the lights not going to maximize utility. Lack of certainty makes it impossible to make judgment about the value of future generations. Third, cuspid ways. All the people that are saved by the app would otherwise have their future generations destroyed, which acts as the same exponential multiplier, so it'd still be 3 million versus 7 million ratio. Since the probability of the app will be way higher, probability times magnitude means the app impact is bigger impact. GPV doesn't warn why future generations matter, so it's not responsive. They don't get new evidence, and the two are top level. None of the scenarios for extinction in their evidence are complete arguments. It takes way more than 2 sentences to establish that extremely complex problems like AI, nanotech, simulation, etc. are probable and guarantees extinction. Their evidence is just a bad summary of Boschem with no warrants, which means any risk nuclear winter causes extinction is sufficient. That way, no baby universe. Their evidence is 3 sentences with no warrant. They didn't highlight the part that said scientists are developing the status code, even if they're trying to. That doesn't mean it's possible. Lasers doesn't say it causes extinction, and it doesn't say they actually can develop it. They have no evidence they're trying to, or that it'll actually end up being successful. And even if it does, it'll be so far in the future that the app massively outweighs on time frame. AI is safe, no. Google's in 19 artificial intelligence, not human. Their weak evidence that they have enough taking orders. AI is known for the evil and the courage not like develop a sense of self for artificial intelligence. Better humans appears limitless missions will not become evil and try to take precautions when programming. Reality isn't a sci-fi movie. Duffy 19 every 15 years there's tech raging movie existential years. AI is not against them already. Our narrative designed for specific detection. Really, so much whether it's people in time systems, super intelligence. Movies, the nuke winter debate. Yes, extinction. Millions of tons of soup blocks sunlight, which causes ice age, global famine, drought, resource wars. More hundreds of millions die for the initial impact. Then nuclear war sets in and kills everyone. This Johnson Star evidence outweighs specific to impact war and takes into account recent technology. Risner is wrong. They simulated a blast in Atlanta, not dense urban cities like New Delhi and Islamabad. They also don't share their methodology, so the results aren't doable, and you should reject their study. The landmass stuff doesn't matter because it's about human extinction. Even if the Earth is intact, nuking the planet doesn't matter because those aren't dense cities which are sharing for firestorms. Their list of islands doesn't prove anything. Shelters fear that's Bosch 84 nuclear war not allowed to survive official environment, provide food shelter without this being turned out to survive biological nutrition. Not change effective nuclear will be genetically numbers of human beings, isolation, breathing, weak limitation, natural variation, death, birth will be eliminated, humanity time will not be able to reproduce. Transition debate. Their Dooney evidence entirely hypothetical, says it might happen, it is possible, it's not definitive. Darnell doesn't apply because it's about running out of fossil fuels. That was CX. No mindset shift for pseudo technologies inevitable. Bush Hansen 18 million year United believe that economic growth is necessary for growth. This would be considered a matter of common sense. The present not result in weakening could pave the way for paradigm shift. Water pollution with their degrowth and using opposite policies. Also, if they're right that fossil fuels are low in the status quo, that means that it's not unique because it proves their collapse stuff will happen regardless. Their evidence of its tune and robot corrected for previous errors specific to India and Pakistan and post states that are evidence by 14 years. Any risk is sufficient. Yes, famine. They shouldn't count on little fishies for multiple decades. The DISAC. No link, neither country has bioweapons and they can't develop them due to agreements. Ahmed 10, India, Pakistan are parties of BWC active in global weapons against bioweapons. Force and read evidence that in Pakistan will go back on the agreement or that their incentives to develop CBWs outweighs becoming international priorities. Even if they have the capability, this doesn't mean they have the motive. No internal link, there's no incentive to develop large-scale pandemics that could kill everyone on the planet because they want localized pathogens that don't affect their own citizens. They need evidence that connects their internal link to their impact. Tarun analytic explanation in CX is insufficient to overcome that specific act evidence, which is specifically why nukes cause escalation, not just why generally they care about and would accidentally cause a bioweapon. No bioweapons. In fact, that's revealed 67 complexity proven significant very contagious agents will not be with social factors that counter is access to data, not information on the task knowledge will hurt CBW. Serious will only get the vertical scaling of prioritization requiring considerable interdisciplinary skills.
Could you send a marked off while I get correct?
Yeah. Do you need me to delete the cards I didn't read or just the parts that were marked? Or I don't
Yeah,
think
just, I don't think you marked any parts.
Yeah, so just get rid of the cards I didn't read.
Yeah, I'll start now.
Yeah.
It'll be the one in C order. Oh, let me send the doc quickly. Anyone not ready? You got all the doc.
Okay.
What's the order?
One in C in order. The T bioweapons strategist.
Still opening. I'm good.
They didn't make an RB on P not going for bioweapons. I'm going to concede there's no impact on bioweapons. The case page. They massively underestimated Spark. If we would have risked that transition, stopped any inevitable extinction scenario, you can vote negative. There are too many extinction scenarios that are just conceded, and they just go through this ethos-y persuasive thing that it was 2 sentences, but they're still conceded, which means you should assign 100% probability to line by line of the argument. They say it's morally Republican. So are your arguments that say future generations do not matter and extinction would not matter if it affected future generations. That also would be morally repugnant. The line by line one, they say there's no impact because they never come into existence, but yes, the potential that of them of experiencing pleasure or pain and human life would obviously still matter. Second, they say that they will live lives of great value, but your ev also assumes people in the status quo enjoy their lives. It just cuts both ways. Either way, a risk that they enjoy their lives in the future is still a reason that we should preserve the lives. They say it cuts both ways. No, it doesn't. Saving 100 million does not outweigh saving all of humanity, because saving all of humanity would risk way more future generations than 100 million people, which would easily be solved. After this, the GPP, they say we don't get new cards on this, but you did not warrant why future gens don't matter in the 1AC, and it was a new one-year argument. We should get new cards. And here, the discounting future generations would cause extinction, only formalizing a mechanism the way their concern solves. Jones 18. Global existential risk pose central challenges for intergenerational justice and the structure of democracy. Risk would lead to extinction of humanity. Nuclear war, climate change, emerging tech and bio, geoengineering, distributed manufacturing, and AI. Experts estimate suggest a non-negligible probability of catastrophic harm. Future generations are underrepresented in political structures due to political presentism. Don't systematically neglect catastrophic risk of future generations. The problem transcends political divisions. Future people have no voice. There's collective incentives to mitigate risk. They need to include explicit governance structures for future generations have been noticed. This means that that you're psychologically biased against future generations, so you should just default negative. Now the extinction stuff, the top level, they just say it's 2 lines, but if you conceded it, that means it's game over. Here are a bunch of here's the conceded scenario I'll go for. They answer AI, but they do not answer the nanotech specific part. Misuse of nanotech will cause gray goo, where they will self-replicate and enable the construction of self-replicating robots, and they'll continue to self-replicate by maximizing entropy, which would eat up the entire biosphere and destroy it, causing all humans to die on Earth, which shows that countries are already investing billions of dollars into nanotech right now, and the nanotech scenario is just conceded. Gray goo is conceded. Their only answer to this is like AI is safe, no goo, but the AI card is like AI is not evil. Like it's talking about how AI is no more evil than a card. It's all speculative, and it's 2 sentences that is just terrible. You should actually read this card. It says nothing, and it's just speculative. It's like AI is unlikely to develop a sense of self at all, but our evidence is specific to why nanotech is being invested in right now in the status quo, and their self-replication would lead to extinction. They've also conceded particle accelerators, which is game over. Particle accelerators, which are being invested in right now, would split atoms and create a black hole within the Earth, which would suck in itself and cause extinction of all humans. These 2 conceded scenarios means you can easily vote negative if you win a risk of defense on the other spark stuff. Now this, yeah, the reality is in the sci-fi movie is also just defense on AI. They just didn't answer any of the other scenarios. Now I just have to win. There's the nuke winter scenario. Here's the problem: they massively undercovered the nuke winter cards that the 1AC answered. First, they just say that you should reject Reisner because we don't provide a study. Yes, Reisner, the Reisner study is in the citations of the card. Your card was indicting his volcano study, but this Reisner card is about how specific about nuclear war. They say it's not about urban cities because it's about Atlanta. Atlanta is an urban city. I don't know what you're on about why that wouldn't cause a firestorm. It talks about specific studies on how at worst at least 70% of it would just rain out in the soup, and they've also conceded an author indict. All of your cards are just written by Toon and Robach, but you've conceded that Toon and You've conceded that Tarun and Robach just assume the black suit ends up all the way high in the atmosphere when it doesn't. We've read specific insights about how Tarun and Robach studies are systematically flawed. They just pretended the suit is already up in the atmosphere to please Al Gore, but it's actually just qualitatively wrong. There's no warrant on how it would end up there. It would just be rained out by them. And then the Tarun and Robach part is just miscut, which means there's always defense against this. Now they go again for this famine impact, but the famine impact isn't just about fish. It isn't about fish. For example, different areas of climate would also be able to grow food because in the event of a nuclear winter, places near the equator would turn that land into sustainable agriculture land, which means you would be able to grow food, which trades off. The fishes stuff is still conceded. Who cares? It still proves that there would be an increase in fishery, which means that it would actually increase global agriculture and more food for people, which means that it's game over. The list of islands also, the list of islands accounts nuclear winter and says that even if there was nuclear winter, these islands are located specifically that they would survive a nuclear winter, which means it's game over on the nuke winter page. They just conceded a bunch of author indict, and it doesn't make sense. The black suit stuff, the Kuwait oil fires, the Toby Tough eruption would all disprove this because it also released black suit in the atmosphere. Now I just have to win risk of the transition stuff. The transition stuff, here's what I'm going for. The Dardanelle 17 evidence is massively conceded. Even if the pursuit of tech is inevitable, we don't have enough fossil fuels to reboot an industrial civilization. All the fossil fuels are basically gone in the status quo, which means that if we went through a nuke war, the industrial civilization would not be able to recover. We couldn't smelt things like glass, make metal, roast ingredients of concrete, create artificial fertilizer, which means it would blast us back to the Stone Age and prevent the development of AI. They say it's not unique because then we wouldn't develop particle accelerators already, but we're using fossil fuels to shift over to nuclear energy and renewables. But in the case of a nuclear war, we would destroy all the nuclear reactors and solar panels, which means that we would have to restart creating them, but there wouldn't be enough fossil fuels to restart a society that can create all of these things, which means even if we try to pursue technology, it's impossible for the new civilization to pursue technology because there are no fossil fuels. So here's the framing issue. They conceded extinction outweighs anything else, which is the GBP 17 card. So if there is a risk that nuclear war would lead to a transition, you would vote negative since they've conceded all of these tech scenarios and they just try to go for this ethos pass about 2 cards, which means that here, there's 100% probability that particle accelerators in nanotech cause extinction since they're straight conceded. I've at least put defense on their nuclear winter scenarios. Who cares if it's not about India and Pakistan? There's still specific evidence that indicts your cards about India and Pakistan that black suit just wouldn't end up in the atmosphere, which you have straight conceded, which means there's defense on nuclear winter, no defense on the tech scenarios, and a risk of transition is sufficient to negate, which means game over, negate.
208. Obviously just the case. Everyone good?
Any risk nuclear war causing extinction, sufficient motive for review be massively outweigh on time frame and probability. The framing issues that arguments don't start at 100% credence just because they're dropped. None of their evidence has warrants, and it indicates that it's extremely unlikely and uses tons of qualifiers, which means it already starts at a very low risk, which means we don't even need to win mitigation if we win a sufficient risk of nuclear winter. I'll answer both of their scenarios. Our evidence does answer nanotech in grade 2. It says that there's a psychological bias to assume that AI and nanotech will reproduce itself in negative ways, but that's wrong. They're given super narrow tasks. It's the same as a car. They don't just wake up one day and decide they're evil, and regulations that are put in place on scientists check back the impact, which means the risk of them self-replicating is extremely low. Our evidence is definitely less speculative than their evidence is because it's not just a 2-sentence summary of random Bostrom stuff, and it indicates that it's unlikely and extremely low probability, which is what it's saying. Obviously, there's still a risk, but there's a risk of literally anything happening in all of existence. But if that risk is sufficiently low, that means our impact outweighs particle accelerators was not warranted in their card. I'm going to go through the parts of their card. It says that future high-energy particle initiatives may cause a breakdown that part of our particles could convert, and it's extremely hypothetical. It's saying it may happen. It doesn't say that those experiments are happening in the status quo, that those experiments would continue, or that there's a high likelihood that it would even occur, which means that it starts at already a low probability. There's no guarantee it creates a black hole. They have no uniqueness for this argument, which means it can automatically be assigned zero risk, which was the rest of our arguments and our posturing at the top, which is justified because their evidence just doesn't have a high, it doesn't establish a high risk. The nuclear war does cause extinction. Their evidence does indict it. Atlanta, yes, it's an urban city, but our study is very specific. You should read through our Reisner indict in the affirmative. It's absolutely fantastic about why Delhi and Islamabad are uniquely distinct because they're extremely densely populated, whereas Atlanta has a bunch of stuff like golf courses that mean that it's not as likely to cause firestorms. It's orders of magnitudes doesn't assume, or our evidence says that it's orders of magnitudes lower than is necessary to sufficiently model firestorms, and they didn't share their methodology such that it could be duplicable. They say they included the methodology, but they didn't explain the specific assumptions that they made or any of that other stuff, which is all in our 1ACU indict, which you should read and compare to their crappy Reisner evidence after the debate. That we do have a specific methodology. It's most specific to India, Pakistan, and postdates their evidence by 14 years. It corrects for previous failures, which is in our evidence, and even if they're right that it's unlikely it just ends up in the atmosphere, there's still a risk of it, which as per their logic means there's a risk, means there's risk nuclear war outweighs, which is sufficient. Different areas of the climate near the equator, you shouldn't bet on a couple fishes being able to survive because we don't know how long it would block out the sun for, which means even if it's sustainable for a little bit, even if there's a slight increase in fishery, that wouldn't be able to sustain literally everyone on the planet for that long of a time. The oil fires don't apply because those were in urban centers, which was about the transition debate. If I win a risk of defense, if that's sufficient to vote affirmative there, even if they're right that we get rid of all fossil fuels, that doesn't mean they can reboot society. Specifically, their evidence that they went for, the first spark evidence, says that there are potential new experiments in the future that could also cause extinction, which means it doesn't necessarily depend upon the sort of idea of using fossil fuels or current technologies because we don't know what other things humans could potentially discover, which means there's always a risk humans can find new experiments that somehow cause a risk of extinction. But our point is that that is so low and their evidence already starts at a low probability that literally killing hundreds of or billions of people right now can outweigh that.
Okay.